Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Language Career Summit session. In this session, I'm joined by Betsy Gilland from the University of Hawaii, where she's an associate professor of the Department of Second Language Studies. It's a very interesting presentation because this entire event features lots of discussions about academia, but also about alternative paths such as online business creation, YouTube, social media, teaching online, whatever you might imagine. So this presentation today is going to be about whether you, as a language teacher, should go back to university to pursue postgraduate studies, meaning after bachelor degrees. So taking a master or potentially even a PhD in languages or related studies. And I'm really grateful for Betsy to come here and share her thoughts. She's going to be talking a lot more about what her background is and what your options are for these kind of academic programs. During the week, you'll also find other academic, let's say, appearances to talk about how you can succeed in academia if you want to go down that route. Or if that's not for you, we've got tons of sessions about alternative career paths where degrees are not needed. And I think it's a wonderful time to be alive where you can actually accomplish and achieve a lot of things with or without a degree, and for many people, going to university or college gives you a sense of stability. Of course, there's a lot of social benefits as well. And once you have that degree, there are many kind of steps that open up for you, but it's not for everyone, and that's what Bess is here to talk to you about. So thank you so much for being part of the event with us, Betsy, and take it away.
Thank you, Kris, for the invitation to this summit. I'm really excited to be able to share some ideas with language teachers and potentially recruit a few more of you into the academic world. Although, as you will notice from my title, I may also be doing a service to you by dissuading you from pursuing graduate school, at least at the moment. So please do think carefully about whether what I'm telling you is what you really want to be doing, or if there is another way for you to reach that goal. So I wanted to start just a little with letting you know more about me. I am one of you. I am a language teacher at heart, and I am a language person. I love learning languages, I love using languages, and I love teaching languages. So I started out as a Russian language major. I majored in Russian, worked at a summer camp that was a Russian language summer camp, and taught Russian and loved it, but also realized when I finished my bachelor's degree that I couldn't find any jobs teaching Russian without further qualifications. I also, when I did study abroad in Russia, realized that I really enjoy living and working in other countries. So I decided only a year after my bachelor's degree to do a master's in TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages, because I thought that as my most dominant language, my home language, I would probably be a better English teacher than a Russian teacher. And English is just more in demand. There were more opportunities to use and to teach English than to teach Russian. So I did an MA in TESOL, and I then embarked on 10 years of teaching English, and that allowed me to explore career options that were open to master's degree holders that would not have been possible with just a bachelor's degree. I started as an English teacher at a university in Uzbekistan when I was a Peace Corps volunteer. And then when I came back to the United States, I taught in intensive English programs, which are programs where international students come to study English specifically. And I taught at a university in their undergraduate writing program, which was designed for multilingual local students to improve their writing, to prepare them for university level writing demands. And that was actually where I started thinking maybe doing a PhD was right for me. Before that, when I finished the master's, I thought I'm done, never taking another course again. I just wanted to teach. But while I was teaching students at this California university, I started having more questions about what was their experience like in high school? What had they actually learned or not learned about writing in English, which for most of them was not the language they started out speaking, but a language that they spoke fluently. It wasn't like they were brand new to learning English. So that was what drove me to want to do a PhD. And I decided to study education because I wanted to know more about what had multilingual kids learned in their high school experiences. And I did research in a high school and collected data that allowed me to better understand their experiences as high school students and whether they were really learning what they needed to learn to do well in university or not. So after I finished the PhD, then I got my job that I have now at the University of Hawaii, Manoa, where I get to teach language teachers. One of my main jobs is teaching language teachers how to teach languages, particularly how to teach writing. I lead a teaching practicum to Thailand, which has allowed me to continue doing things in other countries. Also, while I'm there, I get to teach English sometimes to groups of professors at the university. It's a lot of fun. And to research how language teachers learn to teach, which I find fascinating because a lot of times we assume that if you speak a language, you can teach it. But in reality, it takes a lot more than that. And so that's what I'm doing now. But it all started with my own love of learning languages, love of learning Russian, and my interest in teaching English in other countries. So just to give you a little overview of what we'll be talking about, I'm going to list some reasons why you might want to go to grad school. There's certainly others as well. So don't feel like if your own goal is not part of this, that you shouldn't go to grad school. I'll give you some advice on the types of programs that are available for language teachers. I'm assuming if you're watching this, you have a bachelor's degree or you are planning to complete a bachelor's degree. So these are things that you can do after you finish a bachelor's degree. I'll give you some criteria for choosing a program because not all graduate programs are the same. And there are definitely reasons why you would want to do one or another. And then I'll go quickly over a timeline for the application process, just so you know what to expect. And I will try to check in on the Q&A and answer questions. I've prepared a handout that has a few more links and a bit more advice. So I'll give you the link to that at the end, and I'll put it in the Q&A as well. So why might you want to go back to school? One is you are already teaching language, but you realize that there's things that you're not quite sure how to teach. So you want some more techniques and strategies, the practical things in your language teaching. You may also be realizing if you're teaching a language that you don't feel like you are 100% comfortable with, that you want to improve your own language knowledge. Or it may be you're teaching the language you grew up speaking, but you don't actually know a lot about its grammar, about different uses of that language beyond conversational. So you might actually want to focus on improving your own language knowledge. You may also want to know more about theory. So those explanations of why things work the way they work. How do we learn languages? How do we teach languages? How do we use language in society? In all of those situations, you may also want to build your knowledge base, learn more about content, about the information that you need. Maybe you want to create materials and you need more knowledge about how do we go about structuring academic books? How do you write a textbook? Or maybe even you want to improve your own writing. You've read a lot of books and articles written for language teachers, and you think, I could share some of my own ideas, but I really don't know how to approach writing it. So graduate school is also a place where you do a lot of writing. And so this will be a way for you to improve your writing. You may, like me, have a lot of questions about your students or about their experiences or their language their language learning, and you want to find answers to those questions, but you don't know how to go about doing that. So you may need graduate school to help you learn those research methods. Or maybe you've realized that you really love teaching, but the context you want to teach in, you don't quite have the qualifications. You may need a certificate of some sort, and you don't have that. So you have a very clear goal of, I need the qualification in order to continue doing what I love. So the three types of programs I'll be talking about, and as you may have guessed, I am from the United States, and what I'll be talking about is mostly framed in a North American perspective. The US and Canada generally have particular types of programs that are maybe a little different in other places. I know the doctoral programs in the UK and Australia are somewhat different than doctoral programs in the United States, but in general, doctoral programs require or are focused on doing research. Master's degrees may be research degrees, or they may be more teaching related. And then there's also certificates that don't give you a degree, but they do give you some extra qualification and documentation of that. So to start with teaching certifications, these are sometimes ones that are internationally recognized, and sometimes they're recognized by a local government entity. So you may have heard of a TESOL certificate, which is a term that gets thrown around a lot. There's varying qualities of TESOL certificates, but in general, they're meant for people who already know English. So they are not about teaching you how to speak English, but you may not really know the nuts and bolts of how to teach the language. So they're focused on very immediately applicable techniques, strategies, things that you can apply in your teaching rather than theories. And a good TESOL certificate will give you individual feedback on your lesson plans and other assignments from a human instructor. You may have noticed that there are on Groupon $50 TESOL certificates. These, I tend not to trust those, because those are the kind of things that are probably entirely AI generated, computer run. You may not be interacting with actual human beings at all. And I feel like for teaching, this is a place where there's so many nuances that it would be most valuable to have an actual human instructor. Costs more money, but it can be very helpful for you in getting real feedback geared to you as a learner. A really good program, like the CELTA program, will be one where you actually have opportunities to practice teach with real students. So not with fellow classmates, but actually teach to language learners and be observed and get feedback from a trained instructor. Those, of course, cost even more, but the trade-off, I think, is that you really have a quality certificate in hand. Many institutions that want to hire teachers will specify that they require a TESOL certificate or even a CELTA certificate. Now, if your goal is instead to be teaching in a public school, a state-run school, you need licensure from the local government. In the United States, this is done at the state level. In other countries, it's done at the national level. But one way or another, these are programs that will prepare you to teach in that particular place. Usually it involves coursework about teaching children, human development, children's learning. You probably will practice teach in a school, be observed and observe other teachers, and possibly also take some sort of a standardized test. But once you have that certificate in hand, then you're highly qualified for teaching in the public school, teaching children. Quite often, US state teaching certificates can easily be transferred to other states or to international schools as well. The last one is add-on qualifications, which could be an addition to a public school license, or it could be an addition to another degree that you already hold. Things like educational administration or if you already are a French teacher teaching English, which would allow you to then expand your career options in that same area. You might also do a qualification for advising international students. The certificate in that would teach you more about the local or the national immigration laws, things that students need to abide by. How long these take really depends on the type of program. Some TESOL certificates can be done in an intensive month. Many public school licensure programs are a one to 1.5 year long program. Now, these, so as I mentioned before, do not earn you a degree. These are things that are a certificate of some sort, but not necessarily an academic degree. If you feel like you're ready for some more academic study, you might want to pursue a master's degree. Usually in languages, that would be a Master of Arts or a Master of Education. Master's programs are very diverse in terms of their formats. Some are full-time in the classroom in a traditional university setting. Some are part-time, allowing you to take one or two courses per term so that you can continue working. Some are hybrid, where you might have a class that meets online during the weekends, during the school year, and then you go into the campus for intensive classes during the summer. And some are actually self-paced, where there's modules that you do, you get feedback from professors, but you can do them at your own pace. So it's worth investigating the format of a program as well as the content of it. In terms of content, there's a lot of different things you could study if you're interested in languages. You might focus on teaching, you might focus on learning the language, or you might focus on learning how to do research. And the type of degree you get really would depend on what your end goal is. So in my experience, most masters in TESOL or TEFL, teaching English as a foreign language, are much more teaching focused. They may or may not include some kind of classroom research, but usually the end product is you are a much stronger teacher. You know the theories of teaching and learning. You can apply them in your work. You can innovate in your teaching. If you're more interested in the theories and you really want to learn how to do the research side of it, I would recommend a master's in linguistics or applied linguistics, or like my department, second language studies, where you may not learn a lot about teaching, but you will learn a lot more about the theories, about current research, about controversies, critical perspectives on language learning and use. And usually this kind of degree requires you to do an actual research project in the end, where you might write a thesis that synthesizes the work that you've done. If, however, you're more interested in school-age learners, you may actually want to do a master's in education or educational administration or educational technology. These would give you a better focus on how these issues apply at the early childhood or adolescent level. And educational administration would be useful if your goal is more to be running a program rather than continuing to teach in one. And then finally, there's also the option of doing a master's in a particular language. Maybe you really love Spanish, you speak it very comfortably, but you actually don't know a lot about the linguistics of Spanish and how the language is structured. And so you have a difficult time explaining to students why a language, something is the way it is in the language. So you might do a master's in the language. Sometimes you can even narrow in and focus on, say, Spanish linguistics as your focus. You could also study more about the literature and culture of countries that use that language. So lots of options for master's degrees. Usually a master's degree is about 1 to 2 years if you do it full time. And some of that depends on the type of program and how frequently you're meeting and how many classes you're taking per term. So if you're really excited about the research and you have some kind of burning questions about a particular topic, you may actually be suited for doing a doctoral degree. Usually with doctoral degrees, the focus is an empirical research study. So actually going out and collecting data on a narrow area of study. So something about how adolescents learn to write. That was my interest. Or how medical professionals use Spanish in communicating with multilingual patients. The formats vary as well. The US model usually involves 1 to 2 years of coursework, where you actually take classes and do homework and write papers to build your knowledge base of theory and research methods. The UK model usually jumps you right into doing the research. There's minimal coursework unless you really want to take a class. And depending on other countries, they may follow the US model or the UK model or some other model completely. Similar to master's degrees, there's a lot of different options. PhD in linguistics or applied linguistics would give you a focus in on the language side of things. PhD in education would be more focused on the education side of things. Although, depending on the program, my PhD in education allowed me to take a lot of classes in linguistics. So I feel like I got a bit of the best of both worlds there. If, however, you're more interested in the practical side of running a program or becoming a dean of a language department or something, an EdD, a doctorate in education rather than a doctorate in philosophy, might be an option instead. Or as with the master's degree, you may want to do a PhD in a language where you would really study everything there is about the language. Usually, I think in a PhD in language program, you're not so much improving your own language as you are learning about that language. So going into more depth in the linguistics, the history of it. Usually you have to learn 1 or 2 other languages in the same family of that language or in something related. Culture and literature and history and a lot of things related to the language itself. So with that idea, you've now figured out what kind of degree you want. How do you choose a program? There are thousands and thousands of master's degrees out there, and many, many, many doctoral degrees. So while we would certainly love to have you all join us here in Hawaii for a degree in second language studies, we know our program is not right for everybody. So I have a few questions that you should think about as you're deciding what program to apply to. Number one, what do you want to do afterwards? Once you have this degree, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to teach and write materials? If so, maybe a master's or a certificate of some sort would be adequate. Do you want to provide professional development for teachers, run workshops, do webinars and things? A master's is probably a requirement. A doctorate might give you more knowledge base to build from there. If you want to direct a language program or run a language school, you might consider a master's in educational administration or a doctorate in education so that you have a lot more understanding of how programs work and how to develop programs. If your goal is to teach future teachers in a university program where they're earning degrees in language or language teaching, a PhD is probably required. Some universities will hire master's degree holders as adjuncts or lecturers, but you may not be able to move through the ranks beyond that. And if your goal is researching language teaching and learning, a PhD is almost always required. Quite often this happens as part of a professor's job. It could also be something you do in a nonprofit educational focused organization like ETS, Educational Testing Service, or it might be in a for-profit company like Duolingo. So those sorts of things, though, usually having a master's degree is the minimum and a PhD is quite often required. Then you want to think about how much time do you have for this? Can you change the direction of your life for several years? A certificate you may be able to complete in a month or a year at most. But a master's degree, it's usually a minimum of a year, sometimes 2 years, sometimes it may drag on to a third year. Doctorates almost always require 4 or more years. Depending on the amount of coursework you need, depending on the type of research you do, and depending on how much time you have to devote to writing your thesis. So all of these are things to think about too. You may have some burning questions, but you really don't have the time to make big changes in your life for the amount of time it takes to earn a doctorate. This one, unfortunately, is a concern as well. How much money can you spend? There is a lot of expense involved in increasing your education. University programs cost money, the tuition, the cost of the courses. Usually there's additional fees. You may have to pay for a gym or healthcare health service. Then you have to buy the things that go with your studies, books, tuition, books and software and other materials possibly. If you are moving, or even if you're not, you still have to pay for where you're living and what you're eating and transportation to get to and from your campus, to and from the place where you're studying, if it's not where your family is. You may also need to pay some kind of expenses for research, such as buying software or equipment for recording conversations or something like that. And you may also, if you're doing a study where you want to give some kind of compensation to your participants, you may need to pay for that as well. And then also, I highly recommend participating in academic conferences. Attending, if you can, in person so that you can really build your network, attend presentations, present your own work, and talk to people, which I have found is one of the most valuable pieces of professional development there is. Now, that's not to say that all of this has to come out of your own pocket. Graduate degrees, not so much certificates, but quite often graduate degrees have some form of funding that will help cut the cost for you. So graduate assistantships or TA assistantships are often offered to graduate students. These are you teach a class or assist a professor or assist in a research project, and you get paid and your tuition gets paid. And that's a gold standard for graduate degrees. If you can get that, that's wonderful. The stipends are not huge, but they are enough usually to pay your rent and buy you some food. And the fact that then you don't have to pay tuition is quite impressive. So there's also scholarships and fellowships, various kinds of grants where you're given the money, you don't have to pay it back. Sometimes they're related to identity, sometimes they're related to your research, sometimes they're related to financial need as well. And then the third choice would be loans. So I recommend trying to minimize how much you take out in loans, because unfortunately in most language fields, you don't earn huge amounts of money after you graduate. And so student loans do accumulate, and the less you have to pay back, the better. But sometimes loans are really valuable in helping you fill the gaps so you can actually commit yourself to study. So don't say, I'm never going to take out a loan, but also be very cautious when you do. Then you also need to decide what format of program you want. Full-time in-person, the very traditional kind of thing where you are living on or near a university campus, you attend classes in person. This can be best for you if you really want to dedicate yourself to your studies, if you're able to quit your job or minimize how many hours you work. Because classes are quite often during the daytime on weekdays. You may also need to be doing group work or studying with classmates outside of class hours. So you need flexible time to meet with other people. And these are programs that are most likely to include opportunities for having a graduate assistantship where you can get your tuition covered and some sort of a salary or stipend to help support your cost of living as well. If that doesn't sound like something you can do, you just really can't drop everything and become a full-time student, you might consider a program that allows you to do a part-time study, where you may only attend classes on weekends or evenings. You may only take one class at a time. Sometimes these are in person, sometimes they're online, where you attend your classes synchronously or even asynchronously from wherever you are. These are good if you only want to take 1 or 2 classes per term, if you have the time to just do it slowly, and if you want to hold a full-time job that works during regular hours. There are also quite a few hybrid programs. Some are ones where you attend a face-to-face meeting, maybe at the beginning of a semester, and there's another one at the end of the semester, and everything else is done asynchronously online. Some programs have intensive summer sessions where you go to the campus for a month and you take a couple of classes with a cohort of classmates, and then the rest of your year, you're teaching your regular classes and doing either asynchronous coursework or collecting data or something like that. These are great if you have the schedule that will allow them, but they also do require a lot more self-control and time management. So once you've figured out what kind of program you want, then you need to figure out which universities to apply to. Things you want to consider: the program quality. Graduate school is interesting because the overall university quality and reputation isn't as important as the program reputation itself. So some rather middle of the road state universities have incredible top of the line language related graduate programs. Some very elite universities don't have very good language programs at all. So do focus, instead of the university, focus on the program itself. And then you want to think about the specific professors in that program. So are they doing research and publishing on the topics that are useful to you? You don't want to go with a place that has lots of famous professors, but nobody is studying what you're actually interested in. You do want to be thinking, though, about, are these professors who are teaching classes that I might learn something from? And that also comes to the curriculum. So looking at the program, what courses are you required to take? What options do you have for electives? Look at the course catalog and look beyond just the department as well. Think about, in other departments at the university, are there other courses that I might want to take as well? Another thing to be thinking about, particularly if you're going for a full-time in-person kind of program, is what's the student experience like? Are there opportunities for a student organization where you can network with other students and do activities that you find helpful in building your personal networks and things? You may be able to chat with a current student or a recent graduate. Often the university can connect you to someone if you don't already know someone. So it really is good to talk with students who have done the program that you want to do, to see, was their experience similar to what you are wanting out of the program? And then, of course, there's also cost. Try not to go too much in debt for this. Balance the cost of living and the tuition with the benefits of being there. Even if somewhere is slightly more expensive, are there larger benefits to being there? Is there a population that speaks the language that you're really interested in that place, so you can continue working on your own language and cultural connections? Are there opportunities for doing a semester or a year abroad, or for collecting data in another place and funding for that kind of thing? So just briefly, the timeline. Planning to go to graduate school does take you some time. So you need to find out, what's the deadline for submitting your application. In US universities, usually for a fall starting program, something that starts in August or September, applications are due sometime between January and the end of February. Once you've submitted your application, many programs will do an interview with you. So it may be with especially for doctoral programs, it may be with the professor that you would be working most closely with, or with a committee of professors where you talk a bit more about your preparation. Usually then around April, you'll receive offers of admission from the programs that are admitting you. And those will often tell you what kind of funding they're suggesting as well. They may say, we'll admit you for 4 years to our doctoral program with a guarantee of graduate assistantships. So that tells you you won't have to pay tuition, you'll have a job during that time. You may or may not finish the program in those 4 years. You may be able to extend the GA-ships beyond that, but at least 4 years, I can get my courses done, I can get started on my research, and I won't have to worry about other jobs. Then in the US, at least April 15th is the common date for committing to the program. So if you've been admitted to 3 or 4 programs, April 15th, you say, I want to go to this one. And you tell the other ones, I'm sorry, I'm not going here. And then in usually August or September, you begin classes. Sometimes there's an orientation or some kind of training before you start taking classes. But once you start classes, you are a student, and you need to then develop your student routines. So to recap, is graduate school really for you now? Have I asked you the questions that prompt you to think about, yes, I'm ready to commit. I want to go get a certificate in this or a master's degree in that. But you really do need to be thinking carefully about that. If you have clear career goals that you really can't reach without a particular kind of degree, that's a good reason to go to graduate school. If you're just thinking, hey, Hawaii sounds nice, I'd love to spend 2 years on the beach, that's probably a really bad reason to go. We're actually very close to the beach, but some of our students rarely go because they're busy studying for their master's degrees. So be very sure about why you're applying. Talk to people. Don't make these decisions all by yourself. If you're in a relationship, talk to the person you're in a relationship with. Make sure that they are in agreement with you about what you would be doing for this degree, giving up your job or taking up all of your weekends or something like that, or even moving to another place. Talk to current students at the program. Talk to the advisors. Usually a graduate program will have some person that you can contact before you apply at all, so that you can talk through the options, what the program is like, what you need to be thinking about ahead of time, and other kinds of things. They may be able to connect you with the current students as well. So don't spend a lot of money on application fees to programs that really are not right for you. That's another thing to be thinking about. Each application costs you money, and you don't want to waste your money if you're like, this is definitely not somewhere I want to be going. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. I have put together some links for you and a summary of this presentation on this website. That's a lowercase o, capital D2. So go.hawaii.edu/lowercase o, capital D2. And feel free to email me. I'm happy to talk to people about graduate school, particularly if you think you might want to come to Hawaii and do something related to languages. We would love to have you apply to our program. Thank you.